This reflection is titled, We Need a New National Conscience. Catherine of Siena proclaimed that the two greatest freedoms available to all persons are free will and freedom of thought. To have this freedom and have it foster righteousness and justice in our nation and in the world means we must reestablish a conscience of righteousness, justice, and charity in ourselves and in our nation. We are entitled by birth and granted by God to choose as we will and to think as we will. No matter the circumstance of our lives, these are two freedoms all humans share. Paul tells us in his first letter to Timothy, "Now the Spirit speaks expressly, that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of the devil." I remember as a young adult spending some months reading voraciously about the meanings of Revelation, the book of Daniel, and the end times. But I soon put aside the study of eschatology as a fruitless endeavor, something having no bearing on my life. Now, for the first time in many years, I have seriously reflected on the possibilities of Revelation, on the four horsemen of the apocalypse: disease, pestilence, death, and famine. The pandemic is not like conventional war, but nonetheless, it is a world war. This pandemic is striking everywhere and threatens to force changes that will be with us for years or maybe forever. Certainly, many have departed from the faith, being seduced by evil spirits and doctrines. Many are exercising thought and will that throw in the face of America's established morality and in the face of God's commandments. There is clearly a lack of conscience among many, enough to change the world for everyone. It is reasonable to wonder where God is in this crisis and what he plans for humanity. Paul goes on to say to Timothy, "Now the end of the commandment is charity, out of a pure heart and of a good conscience and of faith unfeigned." It is time for every Christian and every moral person across America to examine his and her conscience. On what principles is your conscience based? Our nation has doctrines of good conscience, but it is our free will and free thought that determine whether we act with good conscience in the following these principles. We must remember that even a non-believer can follow the principles and have a pure heart. However, it is the person of unfeigned faith whose guiding principles are the commandments of God. The combination of sound principles and the commandments of God, learned and internalized, establish the base for a good conscience to avoid all evil and the temptations of evil. But our conscience is more than an internal voice of warning. Imbued with the Holy Spirit, our conscience is a guide to righteousness, justice, and charity of duty and goodwill. Our conscience guides our thoughts and free will to always be focused on the things of God. Our conscience, when guided by the right principles, will not only take away our fear, it will ensure our steps are true, even to the point of being courageous. Isaiah describes conscience this way: "While from behind a voice shall sound in your ears, this is the way, walk in it, when you would turn to the right or to the left." We all are tempted to turn right or left, off the path of righteousness. It is part of our nature. Martin Luther differentiated temptation and sin this way: temptation is like a small bird. You can't keep it from flying over your head, but you can keep it from nesting in your hair. Many purport Christianity but have turned their backs on the true faith. They lie, bear false witness, bear arms against their neighbors, oppress the suffering, and feign both faith and law. The true Christian seeks to grow in knowledge and strengthen his conscience against all temptation of the flesh, particularly against selfishness and fear. The true Christian thinks and chooses with a pure heart and a clean mind. The true Christian chooses to obey just laws and the commandments of God. The true Christian rejoices in the freedom of thought and will, knowing they are focused on what is right and just, and above all, what is charitable. Therefore, it is imperative upon us as true believers to not judge others, but strive to grow in the knowledge and wisdom of God, that we may think and act according to the Spirit, who is that voice in our ear. That collectively we can change the conscience of Americans and the conscience of the world. We have the divine power and authority to conquer the will and thoughts of those who would corrupt and pervert the things of God and man. We can bring a revolution of good conscience back into our nation and the world. This I believe.